Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 59 on Views from Downstream. And we're talking this week, and we talked last week about assumptions that both church leaders and pastors and parents make about raising kids spiritually. And this past Monday, I talked basically to parents about the really to avoid the need to feel like you have to rush your child into a commitment to Jesus, a confession of faith, baptism, because of my own experience in dealing with college students, many of which had done that at a young age and then came to understand that they really didn't understand what they were doing and wanted to make a new confession and to be rebaptized. And so I want to talk to church leaders today, particularly pastors and youth pastors, because this really plays a role in what parents think about their kids making confessions of faith. I know from my own experience as a pastor, though I was working with college students, it's the same way. When I had a student who made a confession of faith and or was baptized, I checked that box and I kept track of those check marks. And it made me feel good. It made me feel successful and accomplished when that happened. And so I had to fight, and I think I did this pretty successfully. I had to fight the idea that I just want to get students to make confessions of faith and baptize as quick as possible. And I think the same temptation is there for you as pastors and youth pastors and leaders, that there's a feeling of success when we have young people or even adults who commit their lives to Jesus and are baptized. And there's a danger in that. And we have to realize that, is that the danger is that this good feeling that we get, this validation that we get of our ministry, may lead us to overemphasize to young people, and particularly kids, their need to make a confession, their need to be baptized. And I know that there are many of you who do camps, summer camps, and I was a part of one of those camps for a couple summers while I was in college. And I remember the leaders telling the counselors that they shouldn't lead any young person to Christ because they wanted to do it on commitment night, which is a special night, and they had a speaker, and then that speaker would invite these kids to turn their lives over to Jesus. And that always struck me as odd, even then. But the idea was that they wanted as many young people to accept the Lord, and they could write about it in their newsletters, and they could in essence say, look how successful we are. We had this many kids this week in camp commit their lives to Jesus. And again, like I said on Monday, a lot of these commitments don't hold into adulthood because mainly they're not made with an informed mind and understanding. These kids are too young to really understand the full implications of following Jesus. And so I just want to encourage you as church leaders to, I guess, back off some on this idea that, man, we need to have these kids make commitments. If you can just demonstrate to them what it means to follow Jesus, what that looks like in your life, and give them some opportunities of what it might look like in their lives, the whole confession and commitment thing can come at a later time when it's much more appropriate. They are mentally and emotionally in a much better place to do that. But again, I see this being repeated over and over and over in summer camps where the emphasis is on making a commitment to Jesus. It may not be from a parent standpoint sending their kids to camp, but I have seen so many leaders and make that the emphasis. That's the goal. We want to see how many we can get to commit their lives to Jesus. And I just think we need to approach that very cautiously and carefully, because we may be setting kids up for failure because they don't really understand what it means. And so, as I said on Monday, look at the nature of God. God is a merciful God. God is a God who is fair, and he's not going to condemn an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or even a 12-year-old to hell because they didn't confess Jesus as their Lord and Savior. He's just not going to do that. You don't find that in the scriptures. And so why do we need to feel like we have to pressure kids, work it out, and having these emotional meetings at these camps where kids are prone to follow many of their peers, and so we have these massive confessions and baptisms, and really kids are doing it not for the right reason. And so I just want to encourage caution that you don't need to have all these salvations in your church and your camps, youth groups, because that's not the test of your success. That it makes you feel like you're successful. It makes you feel validated in what you're doing, but that really isn't the measure by which God looks at our ministries. He measures our faithfulness and our love for him and our love for the people with whom we serve. And so that's what our focus needs to be on, and not trying to get as many conversions as we can get. I just think, again, as I mentioned Monday, this 50% to 80% of young people leaving the faith after they graduate from high school is an indication that there's something wrong with the way we approach kids in terms of accepting Jesus and committing their lives to him. Something is wrong because it's not sticking. And if these were true commitments, there would be a lot more sticking. That percentage would be way, way, way down. But it's not. It's way, way, way up. And so we need to step back and reflect on that. So I encourage you as leaders to reflect on how you've been approaching these kids in your church, in your camps, how you're approaching them in terms of the idea of their faith in Jesus. Do they really need to make a confession of faith as soon as possible? Or may it be wiser to get them to wait and help them to grow and mature as young people so that they can make an informed decision and not just merely an emotional one? Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Again, if you have comments, post those, and we'd be glad to have a discussion about that. Until Friday, have a great day.